Okie dokie, Hawks. Um, we are going to continue with our reading of the Odyssey. So this episode is entitled simply Penelope, and involves the conversation that is going to happen between Penelope and her husband. Except Penelope doesn't know it's her husband because he's still disguised as the old beggar man. So she's called him up to her room to have a private conversation with him, not knowing who it is. Now, of course, he knows who she is, but has chosen not to speak to her. So, before we even get started, do you think that it is wrong for Odysseus to keep this secret from Penelope? Do you think he should reveal to her who he is and what's going on? Or do you think that he has a valid reason for not revealing his identity and not cluing her in on the plan? And if you think he does have a reason, what do you think that reason is? So there are a bunch of ways you could have approached that question. Being married, I kind of initially always think like, no, you should be honest with your spouse, like no matter what. And but there are some people that argue, no, he's doing the right thing by keeping her out of it. Maybe that's because he wants to keep her safe. Maybe it's because he needs to keep his secret for a little bit longer and he's not sure if her reaction will give his disguise away. Or maybe it's that he just genuinely doesn't know if he can trust her. He's been away for 20 years and he, unlike us, does not know if she's been a faithful wife to him that entire time. So, lots of different reasons why he might choose to keep this secret. And he is. So, he's going to go through this entire conversation with her, sitting there looking her in the face without revealing to her that he is, in fact, her husband. So, let's get to reading. Penelope is the episode we are reading. See if I can even make it a little bit. No, I think that's. Oh, there we go. Okay. Penelope. In the evening, Penelope questions the old beggar about himself. Friend, let me ask you first of all, who are you? Where do you come from? Of what nation and parents were you born? Like he can answer that truthfully. And he replied, My lady, never a man in the wide world should have a fault to find with you. Your name has gone out under heaven like the sweet honor of some God fearing king who rules in equity over the strong. His black lands bear both wheat and barley, fruit trees laden bright, new lambs at lambing time. The deep sea gives great hauls of fish by his good state so that his folk fare well. Oh, my dear lady, this being so, let it suffice to ask me of other matters, not my blood and my homeland. Do not enforce me to recall my pain. My heart is sore, but I must not be found sitting here in tears in another's house. It is not well forever to be grieving. One of the maids might say, or you might think, that I had gone maudlin over cups of wine. So Odysseus is pretty clever. We know that the rule is happy wife, happy life. So he doesn't want to lie to Penelope when she asks him, so tell me about where you grew up. Like, tell me about yourself. And he can't be like, well, I grew up in Ithaca and I have a son and a wife, right? So he doesn't want to lie, but he can't tell the truth either. So he kind of just says, oh, it's so painful. Please, please, anything but that. I don't want to be seen, sitting here crying. That's embarrassing. Please, let's talk about anything other than that. So he just kind of changes the subject conveniently. But remember, she called him to talk to her about her husband. So the point that she wants to get to is, do you know the man? So we left off right here on line 1306. And Penelope replied, Stranger, my looks, my face, my carriage were soon lost or faded when the Achaeans crossed the sea to Troy, Odysseus, my lord, among the rest. If he returned, if he were here to care for me, I might be happily renowned. But grief instead, heaven sent me, years of pain, sons of the noblest families on the island, Dulichium, Same, Wooded Zycanthus with native Ithacans are here to court me against my wish, and they consume this house. Can I give proper heed to guest or suppliant or herald on the realm's affairs? How could I, wasted with longing for Odysseus, while here they press for marriage? Ruses served my turn to draw the time out. So, just so you know, when she says a ruse or ruses, that word, ruses or ruse, means a trick, some sort of sneaky plan. So, Penelope is not stupid. She does not want to marry again. She thinks that her husband is still alive. And she doesn't want to give any of these suitors any power over her. So she has a plan that she has put in place all this time to kind of stall. So see if you can understand what it is, what Penelope's ruse is, what her clever plan is to make sure that she doesn't have to marry any of these guys who have come courting her. So we're right up here with ruses. Ruses served my turn to draw the time out. First, a close-grained web, I had the happy thought to set up weaving on my big loom in the hall. Weaving is like sewing. I said that day, young men, my suitors, now my lord is dead. Let me finish my weaving before I marry, or else my thread will have been spun in vain. It is a shroud I weave for Lord Laertes when cold death comes to lay him on his bier. The county wives would hold me in dishonor if he with all his fortune lay unshrouded. I reached their hearts that way, and they agreed. So every day I wove on the great loom, but every night by torchlight I unwove it. And so for 3 years I deceived the Achaeans. But when the seasons brought a 4th year on, as long months waned and the long days were spent through impudent folly in the slinking maids, they caught me, clambered up to me at night. I had no choice then but to finish it. And now, as matters stand at last, I have no strength left to evade a marriage, cannot find any further way. My parents urge it upon me, and my son will not stand by while they eat up his property. He comprehends it, being a man full grown, able to oversee the kind of house that Zeus would endow with honor. So Penelope had a little story to share about how she was able to put off a second marriage for so long. These men have been in her house for years and years, trying to get her to marry one of them. But she came up with some sort of plan. So recount for me, please, in your own words, how is it that Penelope was able to put off marrying one of the suitors for so long? Explain what her ruse was. Right. So just to recap, Penelope says, I decided that I would weave on my big loom, on my big sewing machine, essentially a shroud for my father-in-law, Laertes. So she says, my husband's gone, he's dead. Who else is going to do this for his father except for me? And a shroud, in case you don't know, is a piece of fabric, a cloth that they used to put over someone's dead body after the funeral when they were laid in a tomb to rest. So they were put out on this big like bench type of a thing. And they weren't buried or put in a casket. They just had this ceremonial fabric called a shroud put over them. So Penelope says, I have to weave this shroud, and when I'm done, I'll pick a new husband. Well, every day she would spend the whole day weaving, and every night she'd sneak back in the room in candlelight and undo everything she did that day. And she got away with it for like 3 years. Can you imagine? Talk about boredom. You and I are all bored in our quarantine, but imagine doing the same thing every day and every night, undoing it, and knowing that for as long as you can, you're going to keep doing the same task over and over. If that's not evidence of how faithful a wife Penelope is, I don't know what is. So she did that for 3 years. But it said in the text that she was finally caught through the impudent folly of her maids. So if you look right here, it says impudent folly in the slinking maids. So her own servants, her own maids in her household ratted her out, or were the reason that she was caught by the suitors. They caught her undoing her work. And they said, "You're going to finish this tapestry, lady, and then you're going to pick a new husband." So she finally had to stop undoing her work. Her ruse was up, and she had to finally finish the shroud. So she says, now I'm kind of at a point where I'm going to have to pick one. My son's getting old. You know, he's not going to allow this to happen, and I'm worried for him. So she's confiding in Odysseus, or this beggar man, that she's reached the end of her rope and she's going to have to marry soon. All right, let us finish reading. So we left off here after Penelope's last lines, and we're starting here with, "But you two." So she's still talking to the beggar. "But you two, confide in me. Tell me your ancestry. You were not born of mythic oak or stone." Penelope again asks the beggar to tell about himself. He makes up a tale in which Odysseus is mentioned and declares that Penelope's husband will soon be home. "You see, then, he is alive and well and headed homeward now. No more to be abroad far from his island, his dear wife and son. Here is my sworn word for it. Witness this, God of Zenith, noblest of gods, and Lord Odysseus's hearthfire now before me. I swear these things shall turn out as I say. Between this present dark and one day's ebb after the wane, before the crescent moon, Odysseus will come." So they have themselves a nice little chat. And when Penelope pries one more time about the beggar's background, he makes up a story about Odysseus. What is it that he says to Penelope that is a little bit of dramatic irony, something that we know to be true, but that the character Penelope does not know? So what is it that Odysseus reveals to her through his pretend story? Right. So Odysseus tells her, "Oh, yeah, I've heard through the grapevine that your husband is going to come home within the day." He said, "Within, from now when the moon is low, from the next ebb and wane of the moon." So, like a full day of sun and then moon. Odysseus will be here. He will come back. He will reveal himself to you within the day. So Penelope is obviously going to get excited, and we as the audience are like, "Ah ha ha, clever, clever man," because we know that Odysseus is there to fight the suitors and take them out. And now we know that this is all going to be happening very soon, possibly even within the day. So Odysseus will truly be back in the flesh, revealed as himself within the next 24 hours. Dun, dun, dun.